Welcome to our first webinar on our two-part series on the JetCharge core load management system. Today's session is just a first introduction to the JetCharge core load management system, whereas in a fortnight's time we have a second webinar coming up where we go more into the detail on the design, installation and commissioning components of our load management solution. So I'm Tate Benito. I'm a customer success manager at JetCharge. I've been at JetCharge for 6 years now, and over this time I've developed a really keen focus and interest on energy management in EV charging systems.
Cheers, Tate. My name's Paul Kramer. I'm the core product manager here at JetCharge. I lead the team responsible for the development and continual improvements to the core load management system. So super stoked to have everyone here with us today. Really excited to get into the content.
Thanks, Paul. Great, so I'll just do a quick summary of what we'll cover in today's session. So firstly, as I said, we'll introduce you to EV charging load management just as an overall concept, and also then in more detail on our solution to that, our JetCharge core load management system product. We'll take you through a couple of really important case studies, some real world scenarios where our core load management system has been deployed to manage large EV charging loads. I'll also take you through a high-level process overview on how you can quote, procure and install our load management system, as well as the associated pricing for our range of core products. I'll also do a quick overview of our online wholesale store, the JetCharge Partner Store, which is where you can purchase our JetCharge core load management system. And finally, we'll end with a Q&A. So if you've got any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to share them in the chat. We should all have access to the chat. There's two features in the webinar. There's a Q&A feature and a chat feature. Please use the chat feature. Paul will be able to respond to some of them throughout the webinar. And then, yeah, with the time remaining, we should have 20 minutes or so where we can expand on any of the questions raised or address any that haven't been answered throughout the session. So first, we'll take a look at EV charging load management and how the JetCharge core differs to other load management systems in the market today. So to start with, we'll talk about what even is EV charging load management and what problem are we trying to solve here. So EV charging load management systems are used to control the total power output of EV chargers at a specific site. So unlike other common electrical loads, EV chargers can draw a really high power. So this starts at around a 32 amp load for a single EV charger, but can go up to hundreds of amps per phase depending on the power rating or the number of EV chargers at a site. And so EV chargers draw this high load continuously and at a sustained level. Unlike a lot of other appliances where there's a small peak as the power draw ramps up and then tails off. EV chargers, when they're operating, they're pulling the 32 amps or the hundreds of amps consistently and continuously. And so that means that if EV chargers are left to operate uncontrolled at a site, that causes additional risk for tripping of electrical infrastructure at that site. So EV charging load management systems are able to monitor the spare electrical capacity at a site, and they calculate how much power is safe to allocate to EV charging. Load management systems do this calculation, and then they instruct the EV chargers to derate their power draw when the load management system has calculated that the site is approaching its electrical limits. And this is how they ensure safety on site. And load management systems you'll typically find come in two forms. They can either be a cloud-based software system or an on-premise hardware system, with on-premise hardware systems being much more reliable and better suited to larger scale EV charging deployments. And so because of that large load that EV chargers can draw, you'll find often when installing them on an existing site or designing infrastructure for a new site, you run into issues of the electrical capacity. When you're installing a large number of EV chargers to an existing site, that site will have been built with a set power supply from the network provider. And if you then, adding new EV charging load, that additional high load that gets added might take you above the site supply So this typically leaves two options available when you're looking to install EV charging at an existing site. First one being you could upgrade the site electrical supply. And as many of you might know, this is a really costly exercise, often in the tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it can often take months and months to coordinate with the electrical network providers to obtain that upgraded supply. The second option that you'll find is you can install a load management system, and this can be very cheap and can often cost less than $10,000. So compared to upgrading an existing site's electrical supply, a load management system can be deployed and allows that available power that's already there to be used more efficiently. We also see that in scenarios where overnight charging is suitable, such as residential apartments or fleet back to base charging, so fleets that are out in the day, electric vehicle fleets that are out in the day, but then come back to an office or fleet depot overnight to charge. In those type of scenarios, load management systems are particularly effective because you've got a large amount of overnight electrical capacity that is otherwise going unused. And so, yeah, that allows customers to much more effectively and efficiently charge their fleet when making use of that overnight capacity with a load management system.
And so our answer to all of the problems and use cases that Tate just mentioned is JetCharge Core. It's our load management system, and we think it's the most flexible site-based load management system in the marketplace today. JetCharge Core is an on-premise load management system, and as Tate mentioned earlier, on-premise systems are much more reliable compared to cloud-based alternatives. You can imagine, these cloud-based load management systems rely on internet connectivity, and internet connectivity can be flaky at the best of times. And so with an on-premise server, what that allows us to do is deal with any offline events. We can keep the site safe if the site does go offline, and we can also guarantee a higher, lower charge rate if the internet actually becomes unavailable. If you have a cloud-based load management system, you'll have to revert back to the lowest charging rate supported by that charger. And so you can also use JetCharge Core, like Tate mentioned, to avoid costly electrical upgrades. Our past deployments really have shown us that Core allows customers to charge 5 times as many EVs than if they didn't include load management. We record the power draw on Core on every site per second, calculating the spare power that's available and controlling the EV charging load. And this rapid monitoring ensures safety on site and means there is no risk of EV charging tripping circuit breakers. And because it is on site and it's not cloud managed, it means that we can respond in a really low latency fashion.
And a lot of other load management systems out there are reporting that power draw, not anywhere near that every second level. So yeah, Core has a much more rapid monitoring and response rate than other load management systems in the market.
One of the other use cases that we haven't touched on here is future-proofing a site. So if a customer wanted to deploy a circuit of say 600 amps, or say 1,000 amps, and they were potentially having to pay for demand tariffs for releasing that whole circuit at once. Maybe they only want to use 600 amps of the 1,000 amp circuit. We've got customers who are relying on Core to actually derate the mains circuit board to actually only allow that 600 amps of draw, and that's saving them per month on demand tariffs. Huge costs. Yeah.
And one of the case studies that we'll show you as well later in the presentation touches on that, showing how some customers can save thousands of dollars in their energy bills. So here's a quick example, kind of similar to what I spoke of before, outlining the two scenarios that you can take when running into site constraints in terms of the electrical demand, but we'll take it with some actual figures now. So you can consider a building that has a 1,000 amp 3-phase electrical supply, and you can assume that the building maximum demand for this building has been calculated to be 800 amps 3-phase. So maybe they've done some data logging or some analysis of their interval data from their electricity meter, and found that there's 200 amps spare on this 1,000 amp supply. And now consider that the owner of this building is transitioning their fleet to electric vehicles, and so they require EV chargers at that building. And they've calculated to provide suitable charging to their new EV fleet that they're going to need to install an additional 250 amps 3-phase to operate those EV chargers. And so you can look at the existing supply of 1000 amps and the current maximum demand of 800 amps. You can add the new EV charging maximum demand of 250 amps, and you'll see that that would take the building electrical, the new maximum demand once the EV chargers are installed, to 1050 amps, which is greater than the 1000 amp electrical supply. And so that's where, as an electrical contractor, you can work with the customer to discuss two options with them. The first one being upgrading that site supply. So you could upgrade that site supply to 1050 amps or above that to make sure you've got additional headroom in the future. But yeah, as you all will likely be aware, this is just a really expensive exercise. Often costs more than $100,000. We see timeframes for this blow out for more than over 12 months, even up to 24 months to get that new supply. And so using the JetCharge Core presents an alternative to that. And by installing the JetCharge Core load management system, you can control that EV charging load, that new 250 amps of load, within the existing 1000 amp three-phase electrical supply. This means that the building owner can reduce their infrastructure costs. They can higher chance of the project going ahead if they don't have to upgrade their site supply, and it means you as well can get started on the project immediately. So now I'll talk about how JetCharge Core actually works and what's going under the hood within our load management system. So it all starts with power meters. Power meters are installed throughout the main switchboard or the electrical infrastructure to measure the power draw throughout that infrastructure. And so they're required at any section of the electrical design that is at risk of tripping due to the new EV charging load. So that might be, you might be adding that 250 amps to the 1000 amp supply, noting that the 1000 amp supply is at risk of tripping. So you need to add a power meter at that 1000 amp supply to record how close the power draw at the building is when it's, how close to approaching that limit the power draw at the building is. So these power meters are constantly recording the power draw at the different sections they're measuring, and they report this data to the JetCharge Core via Ethernet cabling. And as Paul said, this is done on a second-by-second level. So every second, JetCharge Core takes in this data from the power meters and calculates how much spare power is available for EV charging. The JetCharge Core then communicates to the EV chargers and instructs them whether or not they can charge, and if they can charge, at what power they can charge at safely. This is also done over Ethernet cabling. And so if all of a sudden there were an increase in non-EV charging power draw at the building, say everyone's put on their aircon, significantly increasing the power draw at the building, Core will be able to monitor and calculate how much new spare capacity there is after that instance, and will instruct the EV chargers to reduce their power if it's determined that there isn't sufficient spare electrical capacity for all the EV chargers to operate at their maximum output. And if there isn't enough power available for all the EV chargers to operate, their charging will be paused, and some of them would be put in a queue. And then every hour, the Core Load Management System rotates the chargers in queue to make sure those EV chargers or the EVs charging all get an equal and fair amount of charge. And so what we see in almost all cases, our load management system, our Core Load Management System, helps our customers avoid these costly electrical upgrades. There's been very few instances where a customer has had to upgrade their site supply. And in those instances, it's really only been because they're just installing such a large new load that their original electrical infrastructure was never going to even able to cater for that much new load. But yeah, in almost all circumstances, Core Load Management is able to avoid those upgrades and certainly makes use of the power more efficiently. Back to you, Paul.
Thanks, Tate. On to our core variants. I'm just going to take you through our 3 variants of Core Basic, Mini, and Max. So we have a different variant to cater for different size of deployments and sophistication of deployments also. Core Basic is for situations where you only need to control the EV charging load within one circuit breaker or supply point. It comes with an inbuilt power meter and suitable CTs. Because of this though, Core Basic is only suitable for monitoring loads of up to 250 amps on 3-phase. Basic is usually used when you have a single distribution board that's supplying EV chargers, and all the upstream electrical infrastructure can support the new EV charging load. It's just a distribution board supply that you're wanting to control the load at. Core Mini and Max have much more flexibility in their design than Core Basic. Core Mini and Max require external power meters and CTs for installation. This allows you to monitor the power draw at multiple sections of the electrical infrastructure. For example, you might want to install a power meter on the site supply and on the car park power supply so that Core can monitor and calculate the spare capacity at both of these points. Because of this, you're free to select the CTs that are best suited to your project, meaning there isn't a limit of the load that you can monitor, unlike with Core Basic. Core Mini and Max require you to install a Schneider power meter with the CTs, and we'll go into this in more detail in part 2 of our webinar series, which is happening in a fortnight. Mini has a 16-port network switch, allowing you to connect large numbers of chargers or additional data cabinets in your network back to Core. Core Max has a 24-port network switch and also has an uninterruptible power supply, which is often used for critical sites. Core Mini is the most popular product that we find in our product range with all deployments. All of our cores are compatible with a wide range of different EV charging manufacturers. We'll go into a slide after this with all of our compatible partners who manufacture chargers. And one other commonality is that all variants ship with an external 4G modem, which we've found is the most simple and reliable method of establishing a network connection at site. In the past, we've relied on ICN connectivity, and there's varying levels of sophistication and care and maintenance that's supplied for those ICN connections. And so we definitely like to supply an always-on 4G connection that we can maintain and monitor ourselves to really own the reliability of that 4G solution.
Yeah, so it kind of just gives yourselves more flexibility when you're installing a core load management system. If you want to go that extra mile and connect into the existing internet supply at the building, we've found that can cause all manner of headaches, or mean that you have to rely on other third parties for that connection. We provide the load management system with an external 4G modem, which gives you full independence on getting a stable network connection. So thanks, Paul. That's a good overview of those 3 product variants we have for our core load management system. And I'll just now touch on some of the reasons that we think are the most important and the key differentiators as to why you should choose and trust the core load management system for your own projects. And so firstly, one of the key differentiators for our core load management system is its agnostic design. Core is able to load control AC and DC chargers from a range of global EV charging hardware manufacturers. So you find that many load management systems out there claim to be able to work with a range of AC and DC hardware, but when you get into the details of their system, they've often only been tested and deployed with charging stations also manufactured by that same supplier. And so that's one of the key differences with JetCharge Core. We've tested and integrated our load management system with a range of quality AC and DC hardware. Some of the key brands, global brands that we've integrated with, you can see on the screen there, Power, ABB, Schneider, Autel, and not only, I guess, do we claim that they can be compatible with those chargers? We've undergone the testing in our office here, in our car park here. We've got a long bank of chargers that we can swap in and swap out, and before we ever install or claim that a charger is compatible with our load management system, we've got the proof from the front car park that it complies with the behavior we'd expect. And even more importantly than that, we've actually got real world scenarios that we can point to where we've seen the load management system deployed with these different brands. So we know how they work, we know how they behave in real world applications. And so this is why our load management system has been trusted by some of the largest organisations in Australia. JetCharge Core has been deployed in a range of government settings, government offices, fleet depots. We've also seen it deployed in really high traffic bus and truck charging applications, so where the operation of the chargers are absolutely critical to the regular operations of a logistics fleet, for example. And we've also deployed our load management system in some of the largest apartment and commercial office buildings in the country. And finally, one of the biggest concerns we hear from electrical contractors that are starting to grow their commercial EV charging business is that reliable support is absolutely key. You need to be able to access expert support whenever you need it. And our core load management system is designed by our local engineering team, led by Paul here. And importantly, it's supported locally as well. So you can be sure that you'll be able to speak to an expert when you need it. And that could be for specific on-site troubleshooting or just a general load management system question. So now we'll take you through some of those case studies we've alluded to show you some real world applications of where the JetCharge Core has been deployed to manage some really complex EV charging systems and loads across the country.
Cool. Thanks, Tate. Starting off with TGE's Depot of the Future. This is one that's super close to my heart. We worked really closely with the team to collaborate on their requirements and really build a design that catered for a really multifaceted setup with battery energy storage systems, solar, you name it. So that was Team Global Express in New South Wales. They received funding from Arena's Driving the Nation Fund to install a charging system at their logistics depot. Due to the high operational requirements of their fleet, they required a mix of AC and DC charging. This consisted of two 400 kilowatt chem power units, which supplied a total of 16 single 300 amp DC satellites. On the AC charging side, there was 49 ChargeMate AC chargers installed also. That is our own proprietary charger here that we make here at JetCharge, which is Australian made. The JetCharge Core Mini was used at this site as well to control the total EV power, charging power draw within the site's limits. Given the huge potential power draw of these EV chargers, TGE also risked exposure to significant peak demand charges, which I spoke to earlier. These are costs that they would have incurred in their energy bills from the network that are based on the site's maximum demand. The core load management system was configured to ensure that these additional peak demand charges were minimized, ensuring the lowest cost of EV charging operations at their depot.
And this is an example of a site which, by configuring the core load management system not to allow the site to go above a certain maximum demand, we're able to work with the client so that they save thousands of dollars in energy bills each month because we cap the total power draw of the EV chargers.
And we spoke to 4G earlier. This was one of the first sites where we actually deployed our multi-carrier SIM, which allows our equipment to connect to both Telstra and Optus infrastructure, 4G towers. We found that Optus signal was pretty patchy at this site, and we were typically using Optus SIMs. We moved to a multi-carrier SIM provider, and now our equipment connects to a local Telstra tower with far better reliability from an internet standpoint. We support offline mode, obviously, which I mentioned earlier, but the core still shares telemetry with our cloud solution for reporting purposes and for the Arena program that they subscribed to. They actually TGE needed to report that data via Illuminate, so that the internet connectivity can become really important with these load management solutions and charging solutions.
Thanks, Paul. So the second case study I'll take you through also shows the impact of the core load management system. And this is an apartment building called Tennyson Reach in Brisbane. Tennyson Reach is a building with over 215 apartment units and over 400 car spaces, which are spread across two really large basement car parks. And so the building, they wanted to provide EV charging access to all residents. And to do so, the car park didn't have any electrical infrastructure to start with. So new electrical infrastructure was required throughout both those basement car park levels. This new backbone EV charging infrastructure consisted of 21 EV charging distribution boards and over 1 kilometre of new cable tray that was required to ensure that all car spaces had an EV charging distribution board in close proximity. And so at this site, in the planning for it, the site's spare electrical capacity was measured. It had a 1500 amp supply from the network. And when we did the analysis of their existing power consumption or power draw, we found that there was no chance they were ever going to be able to install or provision for all apartments to access EV charging without a load management system. So without the JetCharge core load management system at this building, they would have had to upgrade their supply from the network provider Again, upgrading that probably from a 1500 amp to more than 2500 amps. The costs would have blown this project out of the water. There was no way the project would have gotten up if they had to go down that path of upgrading the electrical supply. Jet Charge Core is installed here. It controls the EV charging power draw within that 1500 amp site supply, and also within the limit of all 21 EV charging distribution boards on site. So far, 25 EV chargers have been installed at this site, and an additional 70 car spaces had an isolator installed at the car space wired back to an EV distribution board. So that allows for simple installation of a charger and connection to the load management system at a later date. So there's an overview of two high-profile real-world scenarios where the Jet Charge Core is controlling a really complex EV charging load within existing site infrastructure limits. I'll now give you an overview of the process for selling, procuring, and installing the core load management system. So starting off, it'll all start when you have a project opportunity that might require load management. And so our sales team are here to support you in selecting the right core variant. So Paul went through those three core product variants earlier. Our sales team will help you pick the right one for your project based on the project requirements. They'll also help you to ensure that your design and scope meet the requirements of the core variant that you select. And as I alluded to at the very start of this webinar, our second webinar coming up in a fortnight's time. In that webinar, we'll go into more detail around the design requirements and the design considerations for quoting, scoping, designing EV charging systems with the Jet Charge Core. So once you've selected that right core variant for your project and finalized your scope, you'll be in a position where you can submit your proposal to your customer. And we can also support you there by providing template sales materials that explain the benefit that the core load management system will provide to your customer. At this point, it's also really important to provide your customer with a copy of the Jet Charge Core subscription terms. So these are a set of terms that your customer must agree to for the ongoing operation of the Jet Charge Core load management system. Jet Charge Core is sold as a piece of hardware, but for the ongoing operation of it, the end user, your end customer, will need to pay an annual fee for the service for the load management system to perform that service of load management. And I'll go back into that in a bit more detail in the next slide as well. So if your customer then accepts your proposal, which obviously includes the installation of the load management system, they'll then need to set up an account with JetCharge so that we can activate the core load management system for them once the installation is complete. This also allows us to collect the necessary details for us to be able to invoice them the annual fees that I just spoke of. Once that's all done, you'll then be in a position that you can order the load management system from our online partner store. You should know which core variant to choose by that point based on the previous interaction with our sales team. And I'll also take you through a quick view of the partner store shortly as well. We'll also offer an optional design review from our engineering team. And so at that point, you'll be able to submit a single line drawing if you've developed one for your project. You'll be able to submit that to our engineering team and receive feedback regarding the load management system design. So this can be really useful in the early stages when you're doing your first couple of projects. Submit your single line drawing to our engineering team. They can give you any feedback regarding the location of power meters that report to the core and different design considerations like that. So then once the load management system has been ordered through the partner store, you can then, and you receive it, you can then begin the installation of the EV charging system. Core can be installed at any point, but obviously to complete the final commissioning of the system, you'll need to have the core and all EV chargers. They'll need to be installed, energized, and connected to a network connection, which is where that 4G modem often helps, as we mentioned earlier. And so along with providing additional detail regarding the design considerations, our second webinar coming up in 2 weeks, we'll also go through some more detailed instructions on the installation and commissioning process for the core load management system. So please make sure you've registered for webinar number 2 as well, and we hope to see you there. So I'll now take you quickly through some pricing of the different core variants that we've spoke about today. So here's a pricing table in front of you all now. As we started with the core basic last time, the core basic is the lowest priced unit, but as Paul went through, it's only suitable for load management at a single zone or a single distribution board supply, up to a maximum of 250 amps 3-phase. Paul also mentioned that the Core Mini is our most popular core variant, and that can be purchased through the store at $3,575 excluding GST, retailing for $4,550 ex GST. All core variants come with a 3-year warranty from JetCharge as well. And then finally at the bottom there, in that previous slide, I mentioned that your end customer will need to set up an account with JetCharge so that they can pay the annual subscription for the operation of the load management system. And the cost of this subscription is $100 ex GST per charger connected to a core per year. So if there's 5 chargers at a site all being managed by core, your end customer will need to pay $500 per year. So I'll just expand quickly on this $100 per charger per year fee for the JetCharge Core. Your customer will need to agree to the JetCharge Core subscription terms, and these can be found on the Core product pages on our partner store. So these subscription terms, it's really important that they are provided to your customer alongside your installation proposal and quote, because your customer needs to be aware of these when providing you acceptance to proceed with the installation project. We don't want them providing agreement to proceed with the installation project and then later on finding that there's a set of subscription terms that they also need to agree to. All of that needs to be communicated up front so that the client has a full understanding of everything they're agreeing to. And finally, the JetCharge Core subscription must be entered into by one entity per unit. So that's typically the end user who purchases the core needs to be the one that pays for those subscription terms. And so, for instance, in a commercial office building, there might be a central load management system that might manage EV chargers of different commercial tenants. So there might be multiple companies in the building, all with their own EV chargers that they individually own. And whilst each company owns those EV chargers, the load management subscription needs to be paid by one entity. And that's typically the building owner or the building manager. Not to say that the building owner or manager can't then recover the $100 fee per charger from their individual tenants. But just for that agreement, it needs to just be between us, JetCharge, and one entity, the building owner or operator. So I've mentioned the JetCharge partner store multiple times throughout this presentation. So I'll also just take you through a quick walkthrough of that store and how to get there and how you can view our core products. So this is just our general JetCharge website, jetcharge.com.au. You can go into the top here, store, and you will be able to see commercial and wholesale. So I'll click there. This is the landing page where you can, gives you the prompt to shop now or to sign up if you haven't already got an account. And you can also see some of the different chargers and accessories that we have that are our top sellers. I'll just click the shop now, and this takes you to a collections page where you can see a range of different EV charging hardware, starting with AC chargers. I'll click sign in quickly. I've already got an account, so but there's also a different flow where you can create your own account, and when you do submit an application for an account, we'll typically approve that account within 1 business day, so you can get access to view pricing and products very quickly. So here's the view of the collections page again. This time, because I've logged in, there's now also some DC chargers that are displayed there. But I will take you through one of the filters on the side here, which you can see there's a filter for load management. And that will then show you the 3 core variants that I spoke of today, the Core Basic, the Core Mini on the right here, and the Core Max in the middle there. Each with the purchase price that you can get as an electrical contractor and also the RRP displayed there. I'll click in the Core Mini. You can see here we give a bit of a product overview describing the product. I've also We've also got the subscription terms that I spoke of earlier. You can link to them, and so that makes them easily accessible to provide to your customer. Also talks about the different power meters that are compatible with the core load management system, and we'll go into those in a bit more detail in a fortnight's time. There's also a drop down here which allows you to see data sheets, installation manual, again, those core subscription terms and the terms of sale. And then finally, there's a few other things here for features and specifications of the core, but importantly, there's a warranty statement and the returns policy here as well. Back to the presentation now. And so, yeah, our partner store is free to sign up. If you haven't done already, we'll be sending you out a link at the end of this with instructions on how to view and sign up. If you do sign up, your first order, you can use a discount code to get your first order at 15% off. Excludes a couple of charges like the Tesla charger. But yeah, there's a whole range of AC, DC charging accessories and load management systems that are available through that partner store that we hope will help you on your own EV charging projects and journey. So that's all for today. Thank you again for attending the first of our two-part webinar series on JetCharge Core. As I said, please check out the second webinar and make sure you've registered for that. That'll be a really great session where we go much more into the detail on the design, installation, and commissioning. So kind of more getting our hands dirty and seeing what the journey there looks like. So yeah, please sign up. We really look forward to seeing you there. And now we've got the remaining 20 minutes or so left for any questions.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Just as a sneak peek, I guess, to lead on from what Tate just spoke to about the second webinar. You know, I recently, about 3 months ago, I had a charger installed by one of our phenomenal partners. I live down on the peninsula, did a fantastic job. I've worked at JetCharge for about 1.5 years. It's taken me a long time to get an EV, but it's mainly because I wanted a ute. In a former life, I was a landscaper, so I really wanted a ute for the weekend and picked up a shark. So, but that's besides the point. So the partner who came out to site did a great job, as I mentioned, but he mentioned that he had installed core load management previously and found that the solution was ultra reliable and provided a really great solution for the end customer. There was just a lot of slowdown when it came to actually configuring the system. He was relying on JetCharge staff to actually come in, configure the system once it was brought online. There was a big gap, and it relied on him actually scheduling time in our commissioning team's calendar and having those calendars align. And so that sort of turned him off the idea of selling core to his customer base, in that, you know, it slowed down his workflow dramatically. We've been using that feedback as our North Star when building this new product that we've been working on over the last few months. And that is, once you buy the equipment in the partner store and you've completed the order, within a few days, we're aiming to have an email sent to you, which will give you a link to start configuring the equipment immediately without actually having to install the equipment. So you can configure all the equipment in Illuminate, which is our cloud platform, which we'll also be demoing during that webinar in a couple of weeks. You'll be able to configure everything to whatever design that you need to set it up with, and then send the equipment to site with an electrician on the team who can simply just go and install the equipment. The electrician on site doesn't have to open a laptop. They don't have to be screwing around talking to, you know, someone on the phone trying to commission the equipment while they're on site. I know how frustrating that can be sometimes if you're stuck on site, maybe you're out in the rain. You know, it can be very frustrating. So we've really tried to minimize the pain points when it comes to commissioning core. So we're really excited to demo that for you guys in a couple of weeks. We're racing against the clock to get it ready, but we think we should be able to get it done. And yeah, I think there's a link. Sam shared a link to the second webinar in the chat. So yeah, feel free to subscribe.
Yeah, please sign up. And I guess we've got time for any questions. Anything coming through in the chat?
Discount code FIRST15 is the discount code at checkout. So yep, that's it. And there's just a link to the webinar. But otherwise, I think we've been answering questions throughout, which has been great. So yeah, thanks for the questions, guys.
And yeah, we'll hang around. Please drop any more questions in the chat. We've got, as I say, 15-20 minutes left on the call here. So yeah, please send through a few more. We'd love to hear from you.
Can you have a mix of different brands on the same site with Core?
Yeah, great question. Yes, certainly. And I think I alluded to that in one of the slides. This is, from our perspective, one of the really key differentiators with the JetCharge core load management system. It can work with multiple different brands of chargers. As I say, they have to be they have to be a brand that we have tested in our front car park, here, because we want to have that full confidence that the system will operate as intended with that range of brands. But I could think of multiple, the case study that Paul touched on, the TGE Depot of the Future, that has both Kempower, a European brand for the DC charging component, and our ChargeMate AC chargers for the AC component. I know this is very common in apartment settings where there's choice to the end user for private charging to have their preferred brand, and there's sites there where there's 3 or more different types of AC chargers all operating and being load controlled by the JetCharge core load management system. I've just seen Grant Smith pop up there with a question regarding a list, and yes, we can share a list of all the compatible brands with you as well.
And this really, I guess, also speaks to our experience with EV charging. You know, we've been around for, I think, around 13 years. And we definitely, at the beginning, thought of EV charging as a job-related space where we would go install a charger. Once the charger was installed, we wouldn't really communicate much with the end user. It would be fully reliable. When it comes to smart devices like chargers, they rely on messaging protocols which are constantly developing and are open to interpretation. And so it's a really interesting question. Can you have different brands on the same core? A lot of companies out there, load management companies, will say, hey, we're completely agnostic to brands. We are agnostic to brands, but we like to really do the testing because the messaging protocol that these chargers rely on is open to interpretation. So different vendors implement them in different ways. And so that's really the story about, you know, what we learned over time in that they're not just jobs that we're deploying. We have customers that we have an ongoing relationship with because the EV charging space is so quickly and rapidly developing. There's new technologies all the time. There's new connection technologies. There's new OCPP 1.6 has been the standard that we've built on. 2.1 is coming down the pipe, which comes with a whole bunch of different authentication options. And so it really is an ongoing relationship that you have with the customer that will be extensive over the next, 5, 10, 15 years.
See if we've got any other questions here. Yeah, let's come into the chat.
Yep. Okay. In an apartment situation where each user is paying for their electricity, is there a billing provider that needs to be subscribed to, as well as the JetCharge port fees?
Yeah, so if there's a situation where you also need billing, then you'll also need a billing solution to go alongside the load management system. In a public setting, you can use a charge point operator such as ChargeFox, and also in a private setting, ChargeFox also have a service there, and something we're also working on is a private billing solution for the apartment setting to sit alongside the core load management system. So there'll definitely be more to come in that space.
Thanks, Tate. And the next one, I think I know the answer, but what happens if a client stops paying for subscriptions? Do charges stop or keep going without limiting?
Yeah, so if a customer doesn't pay their subscription fees, we'll notify that customer that we will turn off the service. Obviously, we're not going to turn off the service to allow the core load chargers to operate uncontrolled. But so instead, what we'll do, we'll derate all the charges to 6 amps, their minimum threshold, so that they get a drastically reduced service. Obviously, if we turn the service off, then there's still the risk of tripping. But yeah, in those circumstances, we'll obviously be working with the customer, be reaching out to them to make sure those fees are paid. I also see a question here, which was at the start, asking about whether or not this webinar was recorded, and so yeah, that you'll all receive a copy of the recording of this webinar once it's published. It's in the chat.
And just on the licensing situation, As far as licensing goes, it's quite new to us as well, and so we're not going to be super strict on that. We'll be reaching out to you. It's not like chargers will just stop working overnight. We don't have any automated solution to carry that out. However, we can work with you to figure out a situation that works for yourself and your customer. Because obviously we want to be keeping the site safe in every situation.
Definitely. We'll keep things open again for another couple of minutes. So yeah, please carry on dropping any more questions that you might have. Love to hear some more.
To hear from the audience if you have actually installed Core before, any feedback that you might have, and yeah, what feature requests you might have as well. I mentioned my experience with the contractor that came to my house and those great feature requests, which are basically driving a lot of our development now. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you as well. Another question: in case of EV infrastructure upgrade projects with third-party chargers already installed, what would be the process to have those chargers tested and onboarded? That's a really good question. That would be a conversation with myself and Tate to figure out what the time frame is to actually get those chargers tested in our lab at the back of our office here and warehouse. We are actually automating that testing environment so that we can actually unlock new chargers and new vendors in a much more rapid fashion. So we're really excited about that internal. At the moment, it can take a couple of months, a few months, but we're looking to shorten that span dramatically with that automated solution. And what happens to a charger should it lose connection to the core? Will it drop back to limited charge current? Yeah, so there's a minimum charge rate that is configured on every charger, and the charger will reduce back to the minimum charge rate of that particular charger. I don't think I've seen a case where like a switch has failed or cabling has been faulty. I come from the enterprise networking space, so I have seen switches fail before. I used to work for Cisco, and switches do fail, but very rarely. Switch manufacturers typically give you like a lifetime warranty. So it's pretty rare that would actually happen, but it does happen. So yeah, you want to make sure that you're setting the minimum charge rate correctly as per the site limits.
Yeah, and it might depend on the configuration of the core, but and the site, but often you'll need to use a RFID card or an app to authenticate a charge session, which in that scenario, if that charger has the network cable, the Cat6 cable has failed on that charger, then that authentication won't be able to start without that connection. But it may depend on the configuration of the site.
And next question: what happens in a mobile network outage? Is processing instructions locally on site or in cloud? So all of the load management algorithms run locally on core, and that's really one of the value propositions of our product versus other cloud-based products in the market. So your chargers will still utilize the full capacity available to them, taking into account other external loads, even if there's no internet connectivity. So yeah, that's as far as authentication goes. So if your customers are using a charge box for apartment-based charging for authentication, or you're using a JetCharge solution for authentication, authentication will still also be possible. We are building functionality in the future to download a local RFID list from the cloud. At the moment, there's minimal authentication that takes place. We call it low authentication, where any RFID card can be tapped to start a charging session.
Yes. We'll maybe wait another minute, see if there are any more questions to come through. I had some really good questions so far. As I said, we will send out some more information regarding the partner store and how to create an account, as well as share this recording with you so you can refer back to it at a later date. as well as some further information about webinar 2 coming up in a fortnight's time, this same time, 3 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. Yeah, as mentioned, we'll go through the design, installation and commissioning of the load management system. But if there's no more questions for today, let's just see one more come through.
Configuration of core settings can also be changed by the contractor as well as JetCharge. That is correct, yeah. In the future, we'll be able to, it's a multi-tenanted platform, our cloud Illuminate platform, which is going to be what you use to configure core in the future. Permissions are locked down per contractor, per customer. And so, yeah, you will be able to lock down those permissions. And then if you need assistance from JetCharge, we can also access those settings with your permission.
Yeah, that's right.
Thanks, Adam. That's a great question.
Yeah, lots of good questions coming through. Okay, well, we might wrap it up there. Thank you all again for attending today's session, webinar 1 of 2, and we hope that was a great introduction to our load management system for you, and that you can sign up and be with us again in 2 weeks' time to learn a bit more about the detail of our load management system. So we hope to see you there. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see you all.